Hi, Year 11. I'm going to go through Medicine Paper 1 today with specific focus on the how useful question, which is worth 8 marks. But before we do, I'm just going to take you through the layout of the paper. You should be familiar, part of your revision should be getting yourselves familiar with each paper and its layout. There's 2 sections to medicine, Section A and then Section B. I'm sure your teachers have told you to start with the 16-mark question, which is your essay judgment question, and then move on to your 12 marker, and then after that it's completely up to you where you want to go. You might want to finish the whole of section B and complete explain one way question, or you might want to move to your how useful question, which is worth 8 marks. So it's the third highest scoring question on this paper, and you can find this in section A, and section A focuses on World War I on the Western Front and medicine there. Okay, right, so this is from a past paper, and all questions of this type always start with how useful. Okay, so how useful, and when it starts with how useful, that should trigger to you COP. So that should trigger, oh, that's supposed to be a C, COP. The skill of COP, content, own knowledge, provenance. And I would put as well ×2 to remind yourself that you need to COP both sources separately. So do a COP paragraph for this source, source A, and do a COP paragraph for source B. As you can see here, you've got a mixture of sources. You may get 2 written sources. You may get a written source like shown here and a photographic source or some sort of picture source. So when it comes to your picture sources, for your content, you are saying what you can see. Okay, so for example here, you can see the soldier is using, so the medical officer is carrying out a foot inspection. That is useful because it shows us that they were taking precautions in order to prevent trench foot. Right, the other parts I've highlighted in the question are also important. Don't be put off by this word inquiry, it just means investigation. And always highlight your topic that you are writing about in the question. So when you're analysing these sources, always link it back to the topic in the question. It's really important that you're focused on that. Okay, so what I will do is I'll model the first part for you, and then you can have a go at practicing source B. Right, so how useful are sources A and B for an inquiry, for an investigation into the problem of trench foot? Remember, COP. So we're going to start with the C, which stands for content. And as you can see here, I have already underlined certain statements that will help me when analysing the content. So I've underlined quotes that I could also use, which help to show the problem of trench foot. So here are some possible answers. So source A is useful because it describes the conditions in the trenches that led to soldiers developing trench foot. So you can see here it mentions the trenches are wet and cold, they lived in mud and water, so that content is useful because it shows me that. It's also useful because it shows the attempts of the army to prevent soldiers developing trench foot. So you can see here, providing dry socks, rubber boots, and rubbing each other's feet with grease. And, you know, you could stop there if you wanted to, but, you know, if it's a really good source, there's nothing stopping you from going for a third content point. You know, it's useful in the way it suggests that trench foot was a serious problem, which really links back to the focus in the question, affecting the health of large numbers of soldiers. You know, it talks about 200 there in one section. So that information is useful in showing that. Okay, if it helps, guys, write quotes and say what you can learn from these quotes. So say why that information is useful in relation to the topic in the question here. Okay. Once you've done your content, you would move on to analysing the own knowledge. So again, if you want to write your COP, you can tick off your content for this source and you're moving on to own knowledge. So you don't need a great deal of own knowledge. Your own knowledge has to link to the problem of trench foot, and it can link to anything that you find within the text that can relate to that. So for example, to rub each other's feet with grease, from your own knowledge, you know that whale oil was recommended for use as a way of preventing trench foot. You also know, this is something else to pick up on, the conditions couldn't be helped really. They're fighting in farmers' fields, therefore they'd have to be there for several days. There was not a chance really for them to get clean and dry until they moved back to the support or reserve trenches. So that there is, specific own knowledge that hasn't been included in the text, and you're just backing it up even more there. And it also relates to the problem of trench foot. So once you've done your own knowledge, you then tick that off, and the last thing you do is your provenance. Now your provenance, sorry about that, is this section up here. Every source comes with the provenance, who's written it, may come with a date, it may not, and you basically get all the clues that you need in this section to analyse your provenance. So here, Captain Impey was an officer, so he would have been responsible for the health of soldiers under his command, and he would have had reliable overview of their health problems. So he's also like a professional in his field. He's dealt with these problems firsthand, so he's likely to give an accurate account. He's written after the war, it says there, after the First World War, so he's also got the benefit of hindsight, which is the ability to look back on events with, a clearer mind. Sorry about that with my writing, but the benefit of hindsight. But it also suggests, that the problem of trench foot is clear in his memory, so therefore it shows that it was a significant problem. All right, so there's your three-step method. With your COP, again, you can tick off the P, and eventually all of that, I've modelled that step by step, but what you want really is a paragraph that looks like that. So it fully answers the question. The blue bit is the content, the yellow bit is the own knowledge, and you can see there it's been interleaved middle way through the content. You don't have to do it in a block structure. If you want to put in some own knowledge in between your content, that's fine. You're not going to get marked down for that. In fact, it does help it to flow a bit better. And this green bit is your provenance. So source A is useful because it describes the conditions in the trenches that led to soldiers developing trench foot. Also, source A is useful because it demonstrates the attempts of the army to prevent soldiers developing trench foot. Own knowledge. Linking to this, whale oil was recommended for use as a way of preventing trench foot. Thirdly, the content is useful in the way it suggests that trench foot was a serious problem affecting the health of large numbers of soldiers. The provenance is useful. Actually state what you're talking about as well. The provenance is useful because Captain Impey was an officer, so he would have been responsible for the health of soldiers under his command, and he would have had a reliable overview of their health problems. The source was written after the war, which is useful as it suggests that he remembers trench foot as a significant problem. Okay, I mean, you probably wouldn't even have to write that much for your provenance. You could have probably left this bit out, but if you want your grade 8s and your grade 9s, that's the type of analysis we're talking about there. So that's your difference. Right, so you're going to pause this video now, and I would set a timer. It's really important when you're revising to set timers so it's more realistic, more like an exam situation. So you're going to answer the same question, but this time you're going to analyse source B, which is an image, it's a photograph source. You're going to use the same COP method. You may find that you might not be able to get as much out of it, and that's fine. I find that it is harder to analyse photographic pieces of evidence because you are purely relying on what you can see. So just say what you can see, pick out the obvious, this guy here. Look at the environment, look at the big picture. You know, you can see mud here. You know, can you see anything that they stood on? You know, you might even want to comment on, you know, how comfortable they look. You know, try to comment on at least 2 things from the photographic source when you're talking about the content. Your provenance is up here. Okay, so those are the clues to work with. So stop, pause the video now and complete this task. Right, so hopefully you should have had a go at that. I'm going to run through a model answer for that. Now, don't worry if it's not, you know, matching my answer. If you've written something similar and you followed the COP method, you're going to get marks regardless. Okay, so don't worry if it doesn't match this answer. So source B is useful because it suggests that the army took trench foot seriously as a formal foot inspection was being carried out. The content of source B is useful as it shows a cause of trench foot. The base of the support trench was earth, you could see the mud, which would become muddy in wet weather. Own knowledge, the army took trench foot seriously. It was a form of gangrene, there's your own knowledge, and in severe cases resulted in amputation. That is why he's doing his foot inspection. Remember, all of this links to the topic in the question. Some sections of the trenches were in low-lying ground which did not drain well. For example, the trenches at Passchendaele were waterlogged and muddy. Provenance. The photograph was taken in 1918, so it can be used to show that the army had developed measures to prevent trench foot by that time. It is possible that the photograph was used to reassure people at home or army senior ranks that action was being taken to deal with the problem of trench foot, therefore highlighting it again as a very significant illness and a very significant problem, which links back to the topic in the question. So there you have it, guys, for your how useful question. 2 separate paragraphs analysing the sources separately. Some final points for you to end with. Soon as you see how useful, think COP, write it on your papers, and then you can tick the letters off as you answer each one for each source. Do not compare the sources. You write in separate paragraphs. No need to link them together. They are totally separate sources. Just COP them both. There you go. Remember what COP stands for. That is the method. That is what your paragraph is built upon. Hit each of these effectively, tick, 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 you will score 8 out of 8. Make sure you answer both, make sure you analyse both sources, okay? And that is how to do your how useful question. And you get how useful on Germany as well. It's the same method, it's just different knowledge. Exactly same method, just different own knowledge. Okay, right, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and good luck